Welcome to BNEWS Weekly. I'm Phil Gallagher, along with my special guest today, Burlington Fire Chief Steve Yetman. Welcome to the program, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Chief. And forgive the chief if we get some funny noises, because as fire chief, he's always on call.
Mm-hmm.
So after 41 years, you're calling it quits in August. Give us your thoughts on that.
I just can't believe how the time has flown by. I mean, I look back and it's like, I can imagine, okay, I've been here 20, 25 years, but I look at it, it's 41, and it's like, wow.
Where did the time go?
Where did the time go?
Let's talk about the origins of your interest in the fire service. Many of the fire people that we've interviewed over the years have a family member, or they got the bug very early on. What was the genesis of your interest?
I don't. I am first generation. So I didn't really have the bug in school. When I graduated high school, in fact, I was the first graduating class out of this building. So when I graduated, it was like I wanted to do something in public safety. I considered the military. I wanted to do something in public safety, so I just started taking exams. I started taking firefighter exams, police exams, state police exams. I knew I wanted to get into a career where I could help somebody.
Mm-hmm. So you were 2 years post-Vietnam, or post the lottery, right? So
right.
The military wasn't a mandatory.
It wasn't mandatory.
Option at that time. So where'd you end up going to school?
So I actually went to Middlesex Community College and got my degree in associate's degree in fire science. And
then you were on the civil service list at that time.
Yes, I started taking exams probably in '76, maybe even a little earlier than that. So I just kept taking the exams when they offered them. Yeah, I came on in 1978.
Yeah.
At the time they hired 4. They just hired actually Billy Callahan, Lee Callahan, and then they hired a group of 4 of us in July.
Yeah, Al Brabant was
right, Al Brabant, Gary Caldwell, Billy Gangestad. That was the group. That's the last time we expanded the department before 3 years ago.
Right. So you get on, things look good. You're probably on the ambulance at that time.
So on the ambulance a lot at that time.
And then, but we go through a period of unrest from a municipal standpoint, as Proposition 2.5 was passed, I think, in '81.
Yes.
What happened then?
Well, the problem was originally we had to lay off. We actually originally laid off, I think, 14 right out of the gate.
Well, that was the first pass.
Right, 14 firefighters, but there were 5 of us out for up to a year and a half.
Right. So we go through Proposition 2.5. I think we went through 5 or 6 iterations of the budget in '82. And subsequently you come back on, and then go through your career, the ladder of your career from that point on.
Again, the layoff in '81, I actually went over with the either layoffs or the threat of layoffs throughout the Commonwealth. It just so happened that Lexington was hiring. So they gave an exam. They were hiring 5 people. I think there was 900 people that took the exam, and I topped the list. So I went and worked at Lexington for a very short period of time until I came back here. My issue when I came back is within a 2-week period, I was getting married. I got my call to come back to the fire department. I got my call to go to the Burlington Police, and I got my orders to go to the State Police Academy. So I chose to come back to the fire department.
Come back to the fire. So now you, as any rookie or first couple of year man, you went on the ambulance.
I did. We spent a lot of time on the ambulance. Back when I first started, there wasn't necessarily a thing called rotations. So it was, senior men drove fire apparatus and junior guys were on the ambulance. That's just the way it was back then.
Right. Now, we have kind of a unique situation here for our ambulance and our now ALS people in the 128, Route 3, Route 3A. What kind of demands did that put on the ambulance over the years? That was a very busy
Oh, yeah. I mean, since I started the job, our calls for response, just my tenure has increased 400%. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, we were doing 800 ambulance calls a year, and now we're doing 3,600, 3,800.
Interesting from a community perspective, in that we had a population of about 28,000 during that period.
Right.
Now we're 23,000, yet our activity is...
Well, it's that daytime population, plus the highways.
Right, which is now clogged even more
yes.
than it was then.
Yeah.
And we were complaining about traffic in 1982. I guess that was prescient, that traffic was going to be a problem. So let's look at the ambulance. I know you've made some advances here and we've spent more money. What do we have for ambulance capability in those days?
Well, back in those days, it was a single ambulance, and it was 2 firefighter EMTs on the ambulance. We, back in that day, didn't even send the engine. It was just the 2 junior EMTs going out in the box, and that was it. I mean, there was very little. There was no call screening like we have now with 911 dispatching. It was just you might even take the call and then you run and get in the ambulance. That type of situation. So, it was kind of like think on your feet. Back then.
Right. So you were unaware really of the drama, the trauma, of the circumstances surrounding.
You had no idea what you were
until you
walking
got
in the
there.
door. And I can think of several circumstances where you walk in. I mean, you go in with basic equipment, and then you go in the house and you find, okay, we need this, this, and this. And I mean, now the problem was, without the extra hands, you were kind of not abandoning your patient, but you weren't exactly administering care right away.
Right. And plus, if you had a 250-pound man having heart failure, heart arrest.
Absolutely. So that's
how do you
when
get them out of the room?
So over time, we started running the engine with the ambulance, and those guys, I mean, they're great. They're your muscle. I mean, you two go in and you start patient care and medical information gathering, medications and stuff like that, and the guys bring you what you need.
Yeah.
And then, of course, assisting with the heavier type patients.
When I was on the board, people would laugh at me and say, well, what are we going to have 10 guys responding to one of these things for?
Yep.
And I'd be saying, well, hey, if you're on the stretcher and there's 2 guys taking you out and you're 250 pounds and you flop off the stretcher, how would you feel about that?
Right, or come down a flight of stairs, or go to that
sure.
motor vehicle accident where you've got 4 people trapped in the car and you've got to get them out.
Now, technologically speaking, what advances have you seen from the time? Well, remember, I can remember when I was a kid, we had Brown ambulance. We didn't even have an ambulance in the town, and he used a converted old hearse.
Right. I remember.
So what are you seeing for technological advances from your time in the box till your elevation to chief?
We can certainly do more patient care. Now we carry drugs. We never carried drugs before. We spend more time assessing the status of a patient. Back in the day, the term was, scoop and screw.
Yeah, right.
And now the focus is on patient care. So, and we can do a lot more.
Well, we are doing a lot more. We had farmed out ALS, which is advanced life support, right?
Right.
What are we doing in that area now?
So that was back when Leahy opened in the early 80s. Actually, at the time, there was North Suburban Emergency Medical Consortium. So Leahy was responsible for paramedic and ALS service back then. They got out of that business pretty quick. So Armstrong Ambulance took it over, and they covered, in this consortium, there were 10 communities. Over time, and like Borica was probably the first, I think Borica's been doing ALS for 30 years now, and other towns transition. So now that 10 towns, there's only 2 or 3 left. Again, now you have the ability to, you have before, but I can almost guarantee, the difference between response times. Right. I can get you a paramedic in your house in no more than 4 minutes. If we have to wait for a private provider, if I can get to Leahy in 3 minutes and I have to wait for ALS for 9, we're going to
With Station 2, we'll have ALS at Station 2. And
over time, to expand the department in the last 3 years. We're still in process on staff. Again, we'll kick off ALS. Hopefully 2 more going to the academy. I'm in the process of hiring 2 more after that. And we're hitting that time where we're transitioning this department.
Quickly.
I've got 3 more guys going, and then there's going to be a wave after that too.
Right. Now, during the late 80s, mid 90s, we had a controversy there about the emergency room being closed on rotations, and you had to bring them. So that ultimately resolved. You aren't denied access to the.
Never denied access anymore. Right. No, that was a period of it wasn't just Leahy. That was across the Commonwealth. But that situation was straightened out. It was like these hospitals were closing down because of they couldn't handle the input of patients, and it's like.
But that was what they were for. That's what we had.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay, so we've also had a transition, I suppose, from a technology standpoint. We used to have the old call boxes.
Yes.
With the dings in the firehouse. How did that work?
We used to, traditionally, it's telegraph. Right. So that's how they used to notify as time transitioned over, then you'd have like smoke detectors and CO detectors and sprinklers, and any one of those activations would trigger an alarm and notify us.
This was automation that occurred within the commercial sector.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Now the trend over the last probably 10 to 15 years is getting away with that because those systems they're old and they're hard to maintain. So a lot
And they're not nearly as efficient as a
Oh,
cell
no, no,
phone
no,
on
no.
the 911
Right,
operator.
you got 911, but you can. We transitioned to radio boxes. Chief Callahan implemented that program just before he retired, and we went to radio boxes. So we still have the radio box, but we don't have the hardwired system where we have to maintain, which is expensive.
Now, you apprenticed essentially under Herbie Crawford, who just passed.
Yes,
Hey,
great guy. I mean, salt of the earth. I mean, he's just old. 81 with 2.5. That broke his heart where he had to lay off guys. You know, our call volume is going up, and we're reducing staffing.
No, technologically speaking,
We
too,
had-
what we had in here for hazardous waste, et cetera, all those things. Now, you've had an interesting career outside of the
Materials technician.
Okay.
I've been doing that since 1991. So we had a hazmat team in Burlington years ago,
Right.
and there were only, I think, four teams in the state. Woburn had one, Somerville had one, and this was in response back, if you remember the two rail cars colliding in Somerville in the early 80s, and they evacuated 40,000 people.
I
and-
think it was chlorine, wasn't
and,
it?
and they
Yeah.
sent hundreds of people to the hospital.
Yeah.
Well, fire service wasn't geared for that, so now we have to ramp up. So
And there was a more preponderance of that
Oh,
type
sure.
of material
Absolutely.
in the region.
Absolutely. So we started to gear up. Burlington tried it for a while, couldn't maintain it, and it's very expensive operation, and the call volume wasn't there for an individual city and town. So they went with this regional approach. There are 6 hazardous materials response teams covering the state.
Right.
So they're all firefighters. There's no rank involved in that, and we're on call 24/7.
Right. But
So
it's a specialized.
It's a
and they
specialized
could be
field.
here
It's
quick.
305 hours of training.
Right.
It's continuing ed every year. But like my team covers Beverly to Weymouth, basically everything inside 128. So if a fire department goes and responds and they can't handle, they can handle a simple gasoline spill or a simple oil spill or something like that. But if it's chemical or there's large quantities, then they call us in. But that's initiated by the fire department.
Now, you've been on call on a number of different emergencies. Let's start with 9/11. You were down in New York on call down there post 9/11. What were you doing there? Were you doing investigations? Were you doing?
No, I was, one of the little hats I wear is I was trained in stress counseling. And you can't think of a more desperate situation than
Well,
this.
when 500 of your peers are killed.
Right,
in
right,
such a
exactly.
trauma.
So I was trained in it. I was on a team in the local area for critical incident stress debriefing. And when this event happened, every firefighter across America wanted to go to New York.
Sure.
But New York didn't need firefighters. They have 14,000 firefighters. They needed specialists. They needed search and rescue teams and task forces and stuff like that. And I was actually invited. There was 8 of us in Massachusetts certified at this level. So 8 of us went down as a team. Ended up not going right away, but I ended up going the second week.
Right.
And
What was it like? What was it? We saw it on TV, and we could imagine, the dangers, the terror, etc. What was it like to be on scene in that area at the time?
it was life altering for me. I mean, just to walk up to the site. I mean, the country was in a different state at that point, and we went down, and they actually, there's no planes flying, so they sent us by train. And getting there and going through a full day of credentialing and clearances and stuff like that to be able to go down to the site. And then once you get down there, and my first shift was at night, and just seeing this place lit up at night, it's like, wow, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Utter destruction, absolutely. And just some things stick with you, because New York City Manhattan's different than Boston.
Right.
I mean, every building's 40 stories, and to see like steel beams sticking out of the side of buildings like toothpicks and stuff like that, it's
unbelievable.
yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Now, you were also on scene at the Worcester warehouse fire, where I think we lost 4.
We lost 6.
6.
Yeah.
6 fellows there.
Yeah.
What were you doing in that?
That was in the role of the hazardous materials response.
Right.
So, basically there was decon and whatever they needed, there for support.
Right. What changes have been made in the response teams for a 911 type of thing, or for Worcester warehouse, in terms of, should we really have been sending that many men into that building? We were unaware that this thing could possibly collapse.
They knew there was a danger. I mean, we know there's a danger of everything we do, but on that scale, I mean, Worcester brought along a couple of things. We now have rapid intervention teams, RIT teams. That's firefighters on the scene dedicated to save firefighters. Right. That's what they do. They don't do anything else. They bring their tools, they sit up in front of a building, they're with the incident commander, and they just stay there. They don't do anything else. They don't pick up a hose. They don't do anything. Right. If guys inside get in trouble, they go get the guys.
Now, do they have GPS or any kind of a locating beacon on the principal response team that goes in?
Another thing that came out of Worcester really was the advances in thermal imaging.
Okay, sure.
So now every piece of apparatus that we have has a thermal imaging camera in it. Right. Okay. So I mean that's a heat source. I mean it's not taking a picture.
It's infrared, right?
Yeah.
You're looking for heat. Right. So that was the principal problem there, right? They didn't know that there was such a volume of heat behind that wall.
A completely enclosed building, insulated, heavily insulated because it was a cold storage place. Mm-hmm. I mean, you make a show on firefighting on TV, and in reality, it would just be a blank screen because you don't see anything in a fire.
Right. Right. Now you've also responded. Did you go to the nightclub fire down? Was it in Rhode Island?
I did not.
You didn't.
No, I didn't go to that. But I went to the Danvers explosion up in Danvers Port.
Right.
That was Thanksgiving morning.
Right. And what was that? Was that a gas explosion?
No, that was a chemical reaction inside of a solvent.
Oh yeah. Okay. In that chemical plant that was
wiped
there.
out a neighborhood.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one, of course, was the Andover, North Andover, Lawrence event. What actually happened there? How could 3 entire neighborhoods be essentially set on fire with high pressure gas? What happened?
Well, again, your residential type gas system is low pressure. And when you introduce, and everything's, every coupling, every fitting, every orifice, every appliance is geared for low pressure. And now you're feeding high pressure into the system. I mean, so you might have a pilot light that, it's just like a little candle, and all of a sudden introduce that under high pressure, and you've got like a 6-foot flamethrower. And do that in 3 communities all at the same time. Mm-hmm. It was
so that was a snafu by the utility.
Yeah.
Any discussion of safety procedures that would be put in place as a result of that?
Well, I think they've ramped up. Obviously, they've ramped up inspections. I mean, Columbia Gas is still doing remediation and still doing some work up there. I mean, their costs right now, I think, are over $1 billion. So
good.
Yeah, and it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were part of, at that point, that's again, one of those off the chart things. I mean, we're part of a task force out of Metro Fire, and they were bringing in multiple task force because you had like 80 building fires in a matter of minutes.
Right.
So our tower went. Actually, no, I think our engine went. And we went up there, and Assistant Chief Patterson and myself went also. We actually ended up being assigned to the staging area in Andover. So I think we had, and it was me and other chiefs. It was, everybody in my area, Belmont, Winchester, Reading, I mean, a bunch of chiefs. And what we did was we established put some structure to this staging area. I think we had 23 engines and 11 ladder trucks.
Oh, when you're talking about staging, you're talking about delivering
We were at Andover High School,
right?
Line everything up, and as the calls come in, and they were coming in like this, and okay, I need
Send
one
a team
engine.
out.
Here's your pilot. Go. Here's your address. Okay, I need 2 engines and a ladder for a structure fire. Here's your pilot. Here's your address. Go. And as they came back, they just get in the back of the line, and we just kept circling them around.
Wow.
Again, one of those.
80 fires at one time.
Yeah,
That's
it's crazy.
I mean,
and smell of gas and everything else.
Yeah, sure.
Wasn't crazy.
Inconceivable. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned the ladder, and one of the things I used to get as a question was, why are we sending out, $250,000, $800,000 ladder on calls on ambulance?
1.2 million.
Well, when I was on, it was only 700,000 or whatever. Yeah. When I was on the board. So, explain that. Why are we, do we send out the box, and then we send out engine 1, or we send out the ladder? Why are we responding with that
it
kind of?
It depends upon the type of call, dictates the response. Right. So what we call a still alarm, and a still alarm can be a lot of things. It can be just a CO detector going off in your house, and we're going to come down with a CO meter, and we're going to check the CO levels in your house. A trash fire, a car fire, a dumpster fire, a brush fire, that's going to get a single response from an engine. We get
rescuing somebody out of a dumpster.
yeah, there's another one.
Truck. That was quite something.
That was something. So the ambulance is going to get a two-vehicle response. It's going to get the closest ambulance, and it's going to get the closest engine. So it may be engine 2 out of station 2 because they're going to be closer to like Eugene Road and stuff like that. So that gets that. What we call a box alarm is what we call a 2-in-1 response. It's 2 engines and a ladder truck. That gives you basically almost everybody that's working. And that's going to go for any alarm or reported structure fire. Okay, you just need the bodies. You need, your primary, one guy doesn't go in on a hose line. It's 2 or 3 guys going in a hose line. So you're basically tying up, an engine company is a hose line.
Right. Well, talk about the responding to a house fire. What's the open up procedure?
So we get a call, and again, we send the 2 engines and the ladder. So the first arriving company, which is typically going to be the engine, is going to do a drive-by. So that gives the officer a chance to observe 3 sides of the building. He's going to give a report. The ladder is going to get the front of the house. That's why we bring the ladder. The ladder has no water, has no pump, but it has all our ventilation tools. It looks like a circus when we arrive, but it's a coordinated circus. You have to, in a building, you've got heat, you've got smoke, people can't breathe, people can't see. You've got it's
an explosion potential.
An explosion potential. So the whole idea of the ladder truck is they get in there and they basically do your primary search if there's reported victims in the house. Their next duty is ventilation. You want to attack the fire, but you also want to let the heat and the smoke out to let the guys get into the house.
So you got to open up. You got to make a hole in the tallest part of the building.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Can't do that without a ladder.
You couldn't. A fully involved house fire you can't get into. I mean, the temperatures are too high. So you want to let that heat and that smoke out and let the guys give them the opportunity to get in and get to the seat of the fire.
Yeah. Now we've been fortunate. We don't frequently have house fires. How many have you seen really serious home fires in your tenure?
In my tenure?
Yeah.
Oof. Dozens. I mean, yeah, we get probably, I'd say 12 to 15 residential home fires a year. Do they all burn to the ground? No, hopefully they don't. Hopefully we get in and do our job. Yeah. But yeah, we probably get 12 to 15 and probably total structure fires, commercial and stuff like that. I'm not sure. I mean, the call volume is tremendous. I mean, did we have more major fires back early in my career? Yes. But we have more fires now. But they're actually more dangerous to us because of what these materials are made of. Fires are going to burn quicker, and they're going to burn hotter, and they're going to give off more toxins.
More gases, yeah. Now,
so our cancer rates in the fire service are through the roof.
Burlington, because of all of the, well, we can talk about that at another time, but you've been fortunate, and the department has been very fortunate over the years that we haven't had many fatalities as a result of house fires. I think I can only think of 2 or 3 during that period of time. Yeah,
there's been a few. There's one on Stony Brook. There was one I went to Christmas morning back in '82. Yeah, there's been a few. There's one on Beacon Street. You can remember those. We average 20 calls a day. We do 7,500 calls total. I mean, they all. I don't want to sound trite, but they're almost they're routine.
Right.
But there are those that stick out in your head over your career, and you can remember them like they were yesterday.
Well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So let's talk about Station 2. That building was, was it 54 years old? How old?
It was constructed in 1970. It opened in 1971.
Okay, so 29, 30, almost 51, 50 years old.
Almost.
So Building 2 is done at this point. This is kind of the hallmark of the end of your career, right?
What we call substantial completion is done. We're doing punch list stuff. Our intent is to move in maybe the end of next week.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Great.
It's time. The guy's been in a trailer for an extended period of time. They're anxious. I mean, it's again, the original Station 2, we outgrew it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was built in 1970, 71. It was built for the single-story Burlington Mall, Lord Byron and Hallmark Guns. That's what it was built for. Now you look at that side of town, and the change in decades on that side of town is
Particularly
tremendous. I
north
mean,
side.
it was built, and our call volume was, probably 90-10, and then 80-20. Our call volume right now is 50-50 split.
From
And it's,
Station 2.
and it's going to flip.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be the busiest side of town eventually.
Well, as Northwest Park gets built out completely.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Okay.
Tell us what your plans are for the future. Are you going fishing?
I just went fishing with my son. Yeah, I'll do some fishing. I like golfing. I have a motorcycle. I don't intend to work full time after I retire. I'm entertaining some offers to do some part-time work.
Maybe some consulting work? et cetera.
Maybe some consulting. I actually taught CPR and first aid back in the 70s and 80s. I might get back to that. I've had a few offers.
So there's a lot of opportunity out there for you.
Yeah, there is.
Somebody with 41 years of experience who's seen a lot of things. Great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, congratulations. You're going out August 31st?
August 31st, sir.
Wonderful, and I
Right.
presume that we'll have an appropriate celebration. of
I
your
could just slide out
retirement.
the back door. That works too.
Yeah, that would be typical Yetman, but I don't think that's happening.
Okay. All right.
Okay, our guest has been Fire Chief Stephen Yetman, who's retiring after 41 years in service to the town of Burlington. We want to wish him well.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, good evening.